All right, I believe we're recording. So great. Um, I am here with my friend David Paulk, who is currently in Shanghai. I met David at basically Bible camp, I think when I was 14 years old. He's from Georgia, I'm from South Carolina, and we kept in touch and we were pen pals. And now we're both in the Pacific, and I don't know actually if Shanghai is considered, we're both in a very different part of the world than where we were before. And David has generously agreed to talk to me about his current situation in Shanghai. So I would love for him to talk about that, but beforehand, I'm going to ask him to just introduce himself to you guys and tell me a little bit about yourself and your career and what brought you to Shanghai.
Yeah, thanks for that introduction, Alex. Nice to speak with you again after many, many years. So I'm a journalist in Shanghai, as Alex mentioned. I sort of stumbled into the profession. I've been teaching English in Taiwan for several years and came over to Shanghai to help start a school. And from there, a couple of friends I knew through Frisbee sort of brought me on board to this project called Sixth Tone in Shanghai. And at the time, it was an unnamed media startup. And I came on board with them as a copy editor. And that was in late 2015, and I've been with the company ever since. Now I serve as the head of news for Sixth Tone, and I lead a small team of editors and reporters to produce a handful of China-focused news stories in English every day.
Yeah, that's really cool. So if anybody wants to, they can go to the Sixth Tone website and
sixthtone.com. We also have accounts on Facebook and Twitter.
Awesome.
At Sixth Tone for both.
Awesome, cool. Can you now talk to me? We'll just jump ahead to right now in this interesting situation. I was wondering if you could just briefly walk me through everything with COVID-19, about how it was brought to your attention. When did Shanghai is obviously not the same as Wuhan. When did Shanghai start paying attention? And when did the lockdown start happening?
Yeah, so we can go all the way back to day one as far as we understood it. My team started to hear about this mysterious pneumonia in Wuhan, and that was around New Year's or so. The city's health commission, the Wuhan Health Commission, announced on December 31st that the cause of this illness that was going around was a viral pneumonia of unknown etiology. So they didn't know what was causing it. Then on January 2nd, the Wuhan police said that they posted on social media to say that 8 individuals were being disciplined for spreading rumors regarding the virus. And it's widely presumed to mean that they were silenced for telling people that it was SARS or that it was similar to SARS. We now know that as a coronavirus, it is indeed the same virus family that causes SARS. It was later revealed that most, if not all, of these whistleblowers were medical workers. So we had written an article about the 8 people being disciplined the same day, and that was on Thursday, January 2nd. But it was not allowed to publish on Thursday. Mysteriously, it did actually end up publishing over the weekend, only to disappear by Monday. I posted a tweet thread about this story, as I often do when our stories are censored. And whenever I look back at it now, coming up on 3 months later, it's just chilling. It's chilling that all of this was happening so long ago. And for the record, that was the only story that we've had run into any censorship troubles with that's coronavirus related. So just that very first one, and everything else we've been able to report pretty freely.
And that's all stories that you've ever run? Like you've only had one censored story?
No.
Oh, okay.
The only coronavirus related story that we've run into censorship issues with was that very first one. And so although our newsroom was following the story closely from day one, the rest of the country really started to pay attention around mid-January, I would say. And that's when a few different things happened in quite quick succession. The first of those was the Chinese government announced that a novel coronavirus was responsible for the illnesses, and that was on January 9th. Then we had the first human death reported on January 13th. Then we started seeing cases outside of Wuhan around January 20th. And the big bombshell came about a week after that. I remember being up late one night on Twitter, browsing news, when I saw something that just made my jaw drop. I'd never seen this before or heard anything like this before. It was when the Wuhan authorities announced that the entire city would be locked down with no one allowed in or out. And that was on January 23rd. So not a week later, just a couple days later. And that was one day before the start of the Spring Festival holiday, also known as the Lunar New Year. And for all intents and purposes, that marked the beginning of my own quote unquote lockdown. So our whole office was going on holiday from like a day or two after that the Wuhan lockdown was announced. But I and a few colleagues had been planning to stay in Shanghai and work anyway. We had to make sure that we continue posting content. And we were absolutely just flooded with coronavirus related stories day after day. It was pretty exhausting, but also kind of thrilling in a sort of macabre way. The government ended up extending the Lunar New Year holiday by 3 days to give people extra time and make sure that you didn't have everyone rushing back to their jobs and flooding the travel hubs at the same time. And I've been mostly working at home for around 8 weeks now, spending the occasional day in our mostly empty office. We're planning to resume regular operations on Monday, regular working hours, but that is, of course, subject to change.
Right. Right. So I hope that you can go back to work tomorrow. Let us know. I'm sure by the time we get this up there, we'll find out if you were able to go back to work. But it sounds like a really intense, rapidly evolving situation. So you mentioned it was thrilling and but all in a macabre way, but really intense. Can you tell me a little bit more about the different things that you covered? What have you been covering in regards to the coronavirus?
Well, as media outlets in other parts of the world are sort of figuring out now, everything when this comes to your country, everything just becomes about the coronavirus. So there's really no coronavirus related angle that we haven't covered so far. I was just browsing through our page, our topics page for the coronavirus the other day, and I see that we've covered topics about how it relates to the domestic wildlife trade, fake face masks, pop-up quarantine hospitals that you've probably heard of in Wuhan, first-person narratives by patients, some of which are just absolutely heartbreaking. Possible drug treatments, working from home, xenophobia and discrimination against Chinese people abroad, as well as against Wuhan people in China. You see a lot of people from Wuhan or Hubei province, where Wuhan is located, facing discrimination from other Chinese.
Right.
We also have stories about backlash against pets for some reason, because some idiots out there think that pets could be disease vectors.
Which is not true, right?
No. For the record, not true. How students are coping with online learning, with their lessons moving to live streaming and other online apps instead of in the classroom. Stories about apps that let you see where cases have been confirmed around you, which, if it sounds Orwellian, it's because it kind of is. The need for feminine hygiene products among frontline medical workers who are in these protective suits all day and need access to tampons and things of that nature. How the virus has ruined Valentine's Day for many couples. How delivery people have become the unsung heroes of the pandemic, sort of being that lifeline between people who are quarantined, cooped up in their homes and the outside world. How patients with other diseases are struggling to get treated, with all the attention being focused on coronavirus cases now. China's stringent screening measures for incoming travelers to prevent a second wave of infections coming in from abroad. How pretty much every business has had to embrace commercial live streaming to stay afloat, going on these live streaming apps to sell their products because there's no foot traffic in the stores. The mountains of medical waste being generated in Wuhan, and how the city is coping with that when they only have the ability to destroy and deal with a small fraction of the total amount of medical waste that's being generated.
Like, that hadn't even crossed my mind. Like, I hadn't even thought about that. It's such a sad but bizarre problem to have. So right.
There's the link between home quarantines and domestic violence. That's been one of our most popular or most widely shared stories so far. Whether traditional Chinese medicine or TCM can help with this pandemic as much as the Chinese government hopes it can. Coronavirus clusters at prisons and mental hospitals, the outbreak's effects on small businesses, farmers, reality TV shows, movie theaters, and virtually every other industry you can think of.
Yeah. So those stories, they don't, sorry, I should know this, but is there a paywall, or is everyone able to access them, or some of them?
No paywall.
All right, cool. So all of those things you just listed, anybody who's watching could easily go and find more information on.
Yeah, sixtone.com, and then we have a coronavirus tab where you can see all of those related stories.
Awesome. Great. And tell me, this might be a little bit of a sensitive question, but are you confident that the virus is under control in China, and why or why not?
Uh, I am. That's the short answer, but there's also a much longer explanation around that. So I think we can go first back to transparency and reporting. A lot of a lot of this comes down to whether you believe the numbers coming from China.
Mm,
And there's really no way to know how accurate they are. If the World Health Organization is to be believed, China has been commendably transparent throughout the entire process of the outbreak. But for a lot of people, myself included, that's a big if.
mm.
If they, it, That's a big if, since China is the second largest donor to the United Nations, of which
Yeah,
the
I didn't know
WHO,
that. Right.
yeah, after the US. So the WHO is very strongly incentivized to stay on the country's good side. I have very strong opinions about the relationship between the WHO and China, but I won't digress into that here. I
No.
posted along my pinned tweet in my Twitter profile is a long digression about that, a reaction to the report that the WHO released after traveling to China and seeing how the epidemic relief efforts were going. My personal feeling is that the local officials in Wuhan botched the handling of the pneumonia cases in mid or even early December, and this
Huh?
effectively executed a mass cover-up by silencing anyone deemed to be spreading rumors and ordering that samples of the virus be destroyed rather than analyzed, and that's been reported quite thoroughly by Taixin, another very reputable mainland Chinese outlet. And it's possible that China's top leadership knew about the serious risk of the virus presented as early as January 7th. That's I think when the president announced that he was familiar with the virus in an earlier speech that finally went released in late January. The only numbers that the rest of the world has to gauge whether China is winning its fight against the coronavirus are coming from the government, so they have to be taken with a grain of salt, as I've already mentioned.
Yeah.
There are headlines like "No new COVID-19 cases in Hubei province other than Wuhan for the past 2 weeks." That was a recent headline, and another being China sees first day of no newly diagnosed infections, domestic infections. The only new infections they had one day last week were from abroad. So these headlines are either suspicious or convenient, depending on how skeptical you are. But it does stand to reason that the drastic containment measures China has taken, with the extended holidays, with citywide lockdowns, compulsory quarantines, it really does seem like these things have been largely successful in limiting the
Mhm.
spread of the virus,
Mhm.
albeit to the detriment of the domestic economy.
Yeah.
And given how seriously the international travel hubs like Beijing and Shanghai are treating the risk of imported infections by imposing mandatory 2-week quarantines on everyone coming into the country, that's locals and foreigners alike, a rebound to me doesn't seem likely at this point. So I would
Yeah.
say, to answer the larger question of whether I think the virus has been controlled in China, I would say yes, but with a whole lot of caveats.
Right. Right. Yeah, and a lot of countries are following China's lead, so I hope that to a degree it is slowing. I think Australia and New Zealand is now not letting anyone other than Australians. Well, Australians are letting permanent residents, and Australians in New Zealand just making everyone quarantine for everyone who arrives has to quarantine for 2 weeks, and I think we're going to see more and more of that. So I hope that it is pretty intense and pretty drastic. So I really hope that um, it's working. Now, while I talk to you, you are currently quarantining. Is that correct? You have been in quarantine, you said, for 8 weeks now, 2 months.
8 weeks, that's right.
Yeah. Can you talk to me? But when we chatted a little bit earlier, you can leave the house, but yeah, just tell me what that entails and what it's been like for you.
Okay, sure. So for those of us who have been under lockdown or self-quarantine for these past few weeks, that means that anyone who doesn't live in my residential community isn't allowed in without special permission, and nor am I allowed inside other residential communities. It's kind of
Okay.
this grid-based community watch system that's in place now, where you have community workers trying to make sure that the virus isn't spreading by having new people coming in to healthy neighborhoods or healthy areas. But that means that the place where I usually go to get my hair cut for $3 by some old lady I can't get access to that because they won't
Yeah.
let me inside there. It means having my temperature taken with a thermometer gun wherever I go, anywhere in the city, whether it's the office or a restaurant or the Apple store. It means making sure that I have a face mask on whenever I step foot outdoors. It means
Is
ordering the
that
bulk of
part
my
of
food
the,
online.
is that part of everyone? Everyone has to have a face mask on when they go outdoors? Is that?
I don't think it's an official regulation anywhere. It's just something that everyone does, and you're kind
Okay.
of shunned if you don't do
Right.
that, I would imagine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also have to order the bulk of my food online, whether that's takeout or my groceries. It means I spend a whole lot of time indoors, as you can imagine,
Mhm.
watching TV and reading books. But I have at the same time managed to establish some sense of routine. Like around lunchtime, I'm obviously working all day, really long hours covering news still. That doesn't stop, but I have to establish some sort of routine now where over my lunch break, I watch this National Geographic show about snake catchers in Africa. And then once I've sort of wrapped up my edits and stuff in the afternoon or in the evening rather, I'll watch Jeopardy with my partner around dinner time. And the only time we really venture out together is once a week, usually Saturday nights, to our favorite local watering hole where we get our
Uh-huh.
temperatures taken
Right.
by staff with gloves and masks on, and then we're able to order our food and beers and whatever. I'm pretty fortunate that my home and work are both right in the middle of the city, so I
Right.
can get around by biking and walking rather than taking public transport, which is, of course, a cross-contamination risk.
Yeah.
Shanghai has been creaking back to life over the past few
Right.
weeks with people, cars, scooters, everyone sort of flooding through the streets again. But you still see everyone with the same ubiquitous blue surgical masks walking around or driving around.
Right. So I kind of was under the impression, and maybe it would be different in Shanghai than like Wuhan, that like all restaurants and bars would be completely closed, but they're still open. It's just temperatures being taken and masks and gloves and stuff like that.
Well, all the businesses were closed for at least
Right.
a couple of weeks around the Lunar New Year holiday. But they
Right.
also, like, these people don't have safety nets for them for the most part. They need to keep making money. So now
Right.
that the virus has been brought under control to some extent, that they have no choice but to reopen and to start doing business again.
Okay.
And that's also being encouraged from the government. The government wants industry coming back to life to sort of revitalize the economy after taking such a big hit.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely understandable. They're talking about closing the restaurants and pubs. There was rumor of that I read earlier today in Australia, but I mean, who knows? Um, so you've given me a lot of details on what you're doing and your schedule. I was wondering, what do you have any advice for people who have rising case numbers like the U.S. and Australia? Do you have any thoughts around what's going on there?
Uh, sure. I'm not an epidemiologist or an expert, and I'm no
Mm,
authority on how to flatten the curve, the big buzzword or buzz phrase that's going around now. So I can only speak to the measures that China has taken that appear to be successful, and that's washing hands often, not touching your face has been widely documented, social distancing, staying home unless absolutely necessary. As for the face mask thing, there's plenty of debate over whether people should wear masks if they aren't sick. In China, everyone wears masks everywhere, and it seems to be helping, if only by putting people at ease to see that
mm,
everyone around them is also taking precautions.
right.
But if doing that is going to prevent medical workers, for example, from having access to face masks, and if people are going to be hoarding them, then that's probably not something that would work elsewhere. China has also made sure that nucleic acid tests for the coronavirus and treatment are free to everyone who has the virus or suspects they might have it. And this part seems especially important for a lesson for the United States, certainly, where healthcare can be so expensive if you're not insured or if you're underinsured. And I just feel that a society in which people are afraid of suffering financial setbacks from going to the hospital is a society in which the virus is likely to spread.
Yeah.
Chinese authorities and the country's biggest companies, um, the biggest companies perhaps under pressure from the authorities, are also establishing safety nets to make sure that the most vulnerable members of the workforce are able to continue making money and providing for their families. And that's either by paying out monthly subsidies.
Mm.
Governments are paying out, about 1,000 or a couple thousand renminbi or yuan a month to sustain these people, or companies devising employee sharing schemes under which e-commerce giants and logistics companies sort of borrow employees from other industries to meet their higher
Oh,
demand from all these people under self-quarantine. So keeping as many people employed as possible.
yeah.
Just a few measures that China has taken.
Yeah, well, I'm seeing a lot. I think Australia's has a stimulus package injecting money, and the U.S. is doing it as well. So I think we're going to see a lot of those things, which doesn't make it perfect, but it doesn't hurt either. I hope that it helps. As I have a lot of people who own small businesses who are already, a lot of friends I know who have small businesses who are already being affected. I'll ask you one more question, but before I do, I was just, could you clarify what you meant by the nucleic acid test? Is that different?
Yeah, so that's just a general test to see if you have the coronavirus.
Okay, so that would that be the same one where the nurse, is that the one where they're in the cars, you drive your car through and you do the swab?
Throat sample.
Yeah. So that's the main one that everybody's talking about.
Yeah.
I guess I've heard about different types of testing, but that's the one that I guess is the most common.
I think nucleic acid test is just a general term for all of those tests.
All right. All right, great. Actually, I think that was my last question. Is there anything else you want to add or you'd like to say before I stop recording, David, to our Facebook friends?
Nope, that's all from my end, Alex. Thanks very much for this conversation. It's been fun, and I hope it's interesting to your viewers and readers.
Yeah. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, David. I'll hit stop and see what happens here.